when again, it's absolutely better if the Patriots were to try to trade for Mike Vrabel. They would be giving away keys to their future in order to bring him in, right? Welcome into the Hot Read Podcast for Wednesday, November 29th. I'm your host, Easton Freeze, director of published content here at BroadwaySportsMedia.com. We're also brought to you by the 440 Podcast Network. You can follow me on social media at Easton Freeze. Joined as always by producer JT, who you can follow on social media at JT_Runke. JT, how are you?
Oh, I'm good. I thought you were about to say something else.
My cadence there was bad. I wanted to get the how are you out of the way because I have something else to ask you about. But first, how are you doing?
Yeah, no, I'm great. Afternoon? I was waiting for the second part of that.
Okay, so here's the second part. The second part. I can't believe we're doing this, but I simply can't resist. Today we got a lot of really interesting things to talk about regarding Tennessee Titans. We're going to talk about the downright slanderous report from a man also named Bedard up in New England about Ran Carthon and Mike Vrabel. And we're going to discuss the entire Mike Vrabel story, non-story, whether or not he is wanting out, whether or not he would be interested in going elsewhere at the end of the season. All of those things we'll discuss today, the hottest topic in Titans world today, as well as Jaelyn Duncan and some offensive line thoughts. And then we're going to talk about, yes, the playoffs in the NFL and the kind of a league-wide picture of just how crazy this year is and how exciting it should be down the back third of the schedule. It's I think we're about 2/3 of the way through the year now. So we've got the home stretch coming up, and that's exciting. Got all that to do, as well as some sponsor shout outs here at the top. So let me get that out of the way. We are brought to you today and every day on the Hot Read Podcast by BoomBozz Craft Pizza and Taphouse, a wonderful dining establishment. We love going to BoomBozz Craft Pizza and Taphouse each and every Thursday afternoon. We do this show live from BoomBozz in Spring Hill. It's the Spring Hill location. It's about 20-25 minutes down Interstate I-65 if you're in the Nashville area. Very easy little drive down there to come hang out with us because we do our shows at 5:30 Central Standard Time from BoomBozz Craft Pizza and Taphouse. And then we hang out and watch Thursday Night Football after the show each and every week, and it's a great time. We hang out with whoever is coming. We do gift card giveaways each and every week, so if you just come say hi, you can eat or drink on us. Don't know how much more I have to tell you about that. That should sell itself. That is free food, free drink, and a free good time watching football. And we love eating and drinking at BoomBozz Craft Pizza and Taphouse, and we love that they sponsor this show, so we appreciate them. If you're listening with us live today, two things. One, go over to Broadway Sports Media's YouTube page. If you're watching on Twitter or on Facebook, that's great. That's awesome. We appreciate you. But you'll have a better viewing and listening experience if you go over to Broadway Sports Media on YouTube. That's Broadway Sports Media. Their website, their channel on YouTube is where you can find this live stream. And in the comment section of that YouTube video, that is where you'll be able to be a part of the conversation. See, we already got at least one person in there, Logan, one of the Hot Read Apocalypse, the horsemen of the Hot Read Apocalypse, with us already. He says, the Hot Read Podcast where you have a sexy man and a host wearing a hat. Cool. So join the conversation over there on YouTube. And if you are not subscribed to our YouTube, do us a huge, huge personal favor. Hit that subscribe button. Hit the notification button if you are a frequent listener and want to be notified when we're going to go live, which we do 3 times a week during the season. That is super helpful to us. We want to get that subscriber number up as much as possible, and it's free to use. So why not just go ahead and hit subscribe and help us out? All right, JT. Now I've buried the lead tremendously. The thing that we're talking about today, above the offensive line, above the playoffs, above Ran Carthon slander and Mike Vrabel potentially wanting out, we're going to start with a hockey story today. And I'm going to introduce the players involved here, and then I would like for you to tell our fine listeners your understanding of the story, the timeline here, just very briefly. We'll spend 5 minutes on this, but I find it fascinating. Connor Bedard, the most anticipated, greatest prospect in the history, well, maybe not the history of hockey, but in all of hockey in I don't know how many years, a very, very long time. He's the golden child, and he was drafted first overall by the Chicago Blackhawks this past offseason. The Blackhawks also acquired another player named Perry? What's his first name?
Corey Perry.
Perry.
I want to say he's almost a 10-year veteran in the league now. He was a former he's a former Tampa Bay Lightning player, so I've had the pleasure of watching him.
Good player, right? A player you want to keep on your team. Typically,
yes and no.
Player?
he's a rosterable player, of course. He is someone who is always a grinder in the playoffs, someone who can help you get there. But for the last couple seasons, he's been known to literally get to the Stanley Cup Finals for the last 4 years or so, and then not win any of them. So, but he does help your team, and he's a very well-respected vet, at least for his playing skills. That is.
So walk us through how long has this rumor been swirling? Has it been a week? Has it been months now that this rumor has been swirling?
This has been 3 or 4 days worth of rumor. This is
okay.
Not,
so what's the rumor, and then what happened today? This is more your territory, so I'd like for you to run with this.
So, and I was not very privy to this very much until yesterday when I started seeing it wave around. But the rumor is that Corey Perry has
family friendly, by the way,
family friendly, has been having relations with the first overall next star of the NHL, Connor Bedard's mom, Zach Wilson style.
Mother. Corey, Zach Wilson Perry is who we're talking about.
As Logan says in the chat, that has been the speculation. And there's been a couple of Chicago beat reporters who came out last night and said that is not the case. These are not true. However,
hang on. Before you say this, those rumors kind of came out of nowhere. Like until today, we had no reason to believe that they were true. We didn't know where they were coming from.
Mostly because Corey Perry has been put on leave the past couple of days for certain for some reason. And this is where this rumor came from. I don't know who started it, but it has gained some traction, and most people thought it would be real. Some beat reporters said it was not real. However, this morning we got a statement from the Chicago Blackhawks on Corey Perry, which says as follows: after an internal investigation, the Chicago Blackhawks have determined that Corey Perry has engaged in conduct that is unacceptable and in violation of both the terms of his standard players contract and the Blackhawks internal policies intended to promote professional and safe work environments. As such, Corey Perry has been placed on unconditional waivers. In the event Mr. Perry clears waivers, we intend to terminate his contract effective immediately. Now,
unbelievable.
It could be a totally different reason as to why.
No, I refuse to. It has to be.
The Chicago Blackhawks
sleeping with Bedard's mom. Has to be.
However, the fact that they put in there that he has been in violation of the Blackhawks internal policies intended to promote professional and safe work environments is the thing that really drives it home right there. And
it's amazing.
It of course it would happen to the NHL team that has been in the most hot water for a better part of a decade in these sort of scandals with sexual assault and just kind of turning a blind eye to a lot of the things that they've done. So they've been in some hot water. So I get why they said it. However, it's like it's a double-edged sword here, man. Like here's
the most amazing part of this story to me, right? Of course, everybody's speculating now that statement, the way that they phrased it, certainly makes it seem like sleeping with the star player's mom would fit the bill for why you were getting your contract terminated. Here's the craziest part to me. Two situations here. Like one of these two things is true. Either it's true and he really was sleeping with Connor's mom, which is crazy and incredible and amazing and hilarious. Or this is the crazier alternative. It's not true. He wasn't sleeping with Connor's mom. But Chicago's PR team believes that it is better to let everyone in the world believe he was sleeping with Connor's mom than to tell us what he actually did. So either he slept with Connor's mom and it's true, or what he did is so unspeakable, they would rather let his and Connor's poor mother, maybe poor, I don't know, maybe she actually is culpable in this. All their reputations be besmirched and dragged through the mud and laughed at for the next couple of days. They'd rather let all that happen than tell us what this Perry guy did. Either way, it's my favorite. It's the story of the week, of the year, of the century. I love it. It's amazing. It's
great. And of course, 15 minutes later, after he was put on waivers, the boys club of boys clubs, the Boston Bruins, picked him up, which is just so perfect for him. What a great fit for him. And yeah, it is a story that kind of took me by surprise last night and then whiplashed me back today once that finally came down. So I'm interested to see what the fallout is here going forward.
I don't know the backstory. Maybe I'm too young for this. Tighten up Tony in the comments says LeBron went through this situation. Did he? Are we sure about that? Like maybe I missed this, but he turned into a goat. So maybe this is Connor Bedard's like origin story. Maybe this is what really flips the switch for him and he becomes the greatest ever. I don't know. Speaking of Bedards, unrelated to Connor, not going to connect these people because they're unrelated. However, they share the last name. Greg Bedard is a writer for the Boston Sports Journal, a reputable publication up in the New England area. I believe he's the founder and president of that publication, and he has been covering the Patriots and Boston area sports for a long time. Folks who we trust and friends of the show, friends of ours, such as Paul Kaharski, this week have vouched for the fact that over the years, Bedard has been a responsible, reliable, trusted source on all things Patriots and Boston area sports. And he wrote a story this week about a topic that has been discussed for what's been a month and a half now. We've been discussing Mike Vrabel and the rumors about him potentially wanting out of Tennessee, the rumors about him and new GM Ran Carthon potentially not having a great relationship or butting heads or there being a power struggle, and Mike Vrabel potentially being a target for the New England Patriots if and when they let go of the greatest coach of all time, Bill Belichick. This story got a lot of traction, and this isn't not Greg's story, but the entire story got a lot of traction after Mike Vrabel spent the Titans bye week up in New England, sitting in that box, the owner's box, with owner Mr. Kraft of the New England Patriots. Bob Kraft and him got along very well. They have always gotten along very well, and Bob Kraft said on the record that Mike Vrabel would be a dream heir apparent to Bill Belichick. He would be a dream head coaching hire for him personally down the road. That's what kind of sparked this conversation. And lots of folks in New England for weeks now have been talking about the potential of them trading for Mike Vrabel. And again, trading is the operative word. I made a very stupid mistake. Hand up on that. In sports media, good sports media to me is about victory laps when you're right and making fun of yourself when you're wrong. And I try my best to do both. I was very wrong about this on Twitter earlier this week. I made a stupid post that I really wasn't thinking. And I said, Vrabel going to New England, the argument has been like, well, why would he want to go to New England when as many roster deficiencies as Tennessee has, New England has more? And I said, well, maybe that the math on that changes if and when they have the first or second overall pick in this draft. The reason why that's a dumb thing to say, stupid Easton, is because they would have to give up that pick and likely more to get Mike Vrabel in a trade. Because again, Mike Vrabel is under contract with the Titans. The Titans couldn't tell him he can't go work at McDonald's or in the healthcare industry. He could quit and go do that, but he couldn't go work for another professional sports team in the NFL without them agreeing to a trade. And so Greg Bedard wrote this story, and there was a lot in there about what he has heard. He's been working on this story for a couple of weeks now. He's been discussing with his, I'm sure, very long list of league contacts behind the scenes, scouting contacts behind the scenes, just what the situation is with Mike Vrabel and with Ran Carthon and their relationship and where Vrabel's head is at and all of these things. And so to give credit to the original source of this discussion, JT, I'm struggling here. Here we go. Pulling up the actual writing from him. So here's what Bedard wrote, an excerpt from our buddy Zach Lyons over at Football and Other F Words and Football Show here on the 440 podcast. He tweeted out earlier this week. This is from Zach. This comes from Greg Bedard of the Boston Sports Journal. He's been covering the Patriots since Vrabel was a player. Pretty interesting stuff about the Titans head coach and other twists in this Vrabel Titans Patriots love affair. Here's the excerpt of the story that he tweeted. This is from Bedard, and I quote, "Many believe that Vrabel was put in the position of being a strong head coach and wanted the hiring of Ran Carthon as GM. That is incorrect. That was a shotgun marriage by ownership. NFL sources believe the league had a heavy hand in owner Amy Adams Strunk hiring Carthon, a top minority candidate. Vrabel and Carthon had no previous relationship, and it's believed that they don't have much of one now. There have been issues with Carthon's job performance even back to his 49ers days. League sources believe that Vrabel could be looking for a way to force his way out of Tennessee after this season, and the Patriots would be an obvious landing spot, if not the front runner. Could the Crafts trade Belichick to the Commanders, Chargers, or Panthers, and then secure Vrabel? It's not out of the realm of possibility." And the sentence in that excerpt that I and many others took issue with was this one. "There have been issues with Carthon's job performance, even back to his 49ers days." I responded to that tweet from Zach and I said, that sentence, that's a statement that I need like a ton of explanation on, because folks like us on this show, JT, folks like Zach, folks like Mike Herndon and Paul Kaharski and Joe Rexroad and everybody that has been working in the Nashville and Titans sports media market since the hiring of Ran Carthon, I think are probably the best sources, the most well-read on Carthon's qualifications, on Carthon's ability to do the job, and his reputation with past employers, with past coworkers, with former organizations, and everything. I mean, everything that we have heard and dug up and seen and read and found since his hiring has really been glowing. It has all been positive. He's gotten pretty stellar reviews from everybody that he's worked for or with in the past. They all have said that he's deserving and will do a good job. Mike Vrabel publicly has done nothing but praise the work that he and Ran Carthon have done together. So until this, on the Carthon front, we really didn't have any reason to believe that Ran Carthon was unqualified, or that folks that have worked with or around him believe he may not be fully qualified. And taken even further, the implication here in the article is that he's unqualified, and folks think that his work, folks have had some issues with his performance in the past, and Greg implies in this article that he was like a minority hire, like that he was an equity hire, and the league was pushing the hiring of a black man as a GM on the Titans organization because of the color of his skin and not the content of his character, as the saying goes, or in this case, the quality of the job that he can do for them. Now, Bedard was on our favorite person in the world, Jared Stillman's radio show yesterday, and credit where credit's due. Stillman, well done. This is a big story. Stillman gets him on the radio show and asks him the relevant questions. So well done to Jared on that front. But he was asked about that line. There have been issues with Carthon's job performance even back to his 49ers days on the radio show yesterday. And here, JT, is the full transcription. I went through and clipped and typed out the entire transcription of Greg Bedard's elaboration, is the kind way of putting it. I would say super epic backpedaling, hilarious backpedaling of monumental heights on that claim. And before I read this to you verbatim, because I think it's important to read, and it's also very funny to read, I have to clarify that this is word for word what he said on the radio yesterday. The only editorial liberties that I took with this transcription was I removed, and you're not going to believe this when I read it out loud, I have already removed more than half of the filler words, pauses, and ums in this statement. I got it all typed out and decided I needed to remove over half of them because it was literally unintelligible. You couldn't read it and understand it. So what I'm about to read to you is the more fluid and more intelligible version. So here's what Bedard had to say. Quote, well, I'm not going to get into specifics because I don't know the facts. I'm just relating, first, like why Vrabel might not think the Titans are an advantageous position for him. And from what I've been told, and like you, I don't know Ran Carthon at all. I mean, from what I know about him, he came up in the right way through the NFL and working his way through. He worked for a great organization, the 49ers. I don't know him at all. I know him to be, from talking to people, certainly very personable and the kind of guy who gets along with everybody and things like that, but as far as, Rand's job performance, I mean, I asked people like, well, how come, why wouldn't that work? And that's the feedback that I got. I don't know him at all. I'm not going to get into specifics because it's not like I'm reporting a story on the Titans and, making allegations, but, there are things around the scouting community, not anything major. I wouldn't say that it's, mostly minor, but that some people take issue with that. And I don't know I don't know whether it has anything to do with his relationship with Mike Vrabel. I mean, I think that that's sort of a minor thing. When you're talking about, a head coach, whether he wants to stay in a certain place or he sees the potential for, a job opening in a place that he might want to work, that he's talked fondly of, it's more of like, do I see myself? Is this a position where I want to be aligned with this person? Just overall, in terms of our vision for building a franchise, building a team, do we see things the right way? Or do we see things the same way? Is this the type of guy who's going to get me the type of players that I want? Or is he going to get the type of players that he wants? And, I think those are more of the major decisions that go into, any sort of decision for Vrabel to say that, maybe he would want to work someplace else. End quote. Where to begin on that?
Let's break it down.
Let's break that down. Let's break that down.
I've read this 3 times now, and even after hearing you say it, I'm just as confused. Like,
it's crazy. It's crazy.
I really don't think that there was one thought. There was not one from beginning to end thought that in that entire time.
In 6th grade English class, you learn about like passive and active talking and like trying to write with an active voice. There's not a single bit of grammatical active voice there. It is all backpedaling to the point of running backwards. The number, first of all, is clearly this man's I mean, there's a reason this guy is a writer, not a broadcaster. You can tell. He loves the words, and again, I removed over half of them from the transcript. What I just read for you was missing a lot of the knows and ums and repeated words. But like you said, as far as like the closest he gets to backing up that claim that, again, quote, there have been issues with Carthon's job performance even back to his 49ers days. The closest he gets to that is saying, trying to find it here in this mess of this web of here we go. It's not that I'm reporting a story on the Titans. Yes, you are. But, and I'm not making allegations. Yes, you are. But, there are things around the scouting community, not anything major. I would say that it's mostly minor, but some people take issue with that, whatever that is. Again, something minor that is left unnamed. And he said, that minor thing that he doesn't name, he doesn't even know if that has anything to do with his relationship with Mike Vrabel, which he, in the article, besmirches and calls out as potentially, and to be fair to, like, I guess not to Greg, because he doesn't deserve fairness on this, but to us and to folks confused by this, I have been informed by some folks that are closer to the New England media circuit, and it sounds like this Bedard fellow, who I didn't know anything about until this article, it sounds like he's gained a reputation in some people's opinion. Again, it's not my opinion because I don't know the guy's body of work, but in many folks' opinions, it seems like this guy has a long history of, because he happens to be the founder and president of his publication, saying whatever he wants and making specious claims like this, that he's hoping get some traction, but then don't get too much traction. And when they do, like this, he likes to say, you need to just trust me, bro. And we're going to sweep it under the rug. And he's defining, like, I heard a guy say journalism, which isn't journalism. It's incredible. If you are Greg Bedard or anybody, and you're going to make a claim like that, claiming that folks who have, like, he's vandalizing his reputation. I mean, he's besmirching the good name of Ran Carthon by saying he's done bad work in the past and implying that he was a minority hire. It's kind of an insane thing to say. It's slander, right? I mean, is that a step too far to say that that's pretty slanderous, considering he couldn't back any of it up?
I mean, yeah, the biggest problem I have is that when you say there are allegations around the scouting community, like, you can't make any up. Like, you can't give us a solid
allegations
answer.
Of what? Of what?
Exactly. And I think, like, still, yes, what is the allegations that, and I think I saw this post to add to the conversation here. A friend of the show, Sam Fallon over at A to Z, says, yes, Ran Carthon, he brings up a good point that Ran Carthon was mostly involved in the back rounds of the draft. That was his bread and butter. Right. That for the 49ers. That was his scouting. So, like, and I'm not trying to put words into Bedard's mouth, because clearly he can't put any words into his mouth either. But I'm trying to just find any way that this, like, makes sense. And the thing that I think made the most sense is this, and saying, well, he's only scouting the lower round guys. So can he really have this good talent evaluation to get blue chippers? Like, I think that might be
okay, fine.
Where he's going.
There's a Grand Canyon sized difference between questioning whether or not somebody's lack of experience in a certain area will be detrimental to them succeeding in that area in the future, questioning the lack of experience and questioning the quality of their work, because he specifically says that there have been questions and issues with his job performance, even back, and it's interesting, he says even back to his 49ers days, which to me, because the only thing after his 49ers days is Titans days. So is he saying that he's heard there have been issues with his job performance since joining the Tennessee Titans? That's how I take that to mean that he's had issues in Tennessee and also had issues with the 49ers. I believe in that Sam Phelan tweet that you have pulled up, Sam listed, we talked about this back in the spring when he was hired, but the list of players that he helped, if not was, primarily responsible for bringing in to the 49ers team, it's a pretty impressive list, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, just a couple of the ones that as Sam points out, the players that he has helped San Francisco acquire in rounds 5 through 7 since being hired in 2017: George Kittle, Richie James, Dre Greenlaw, Juwan Jennings, Talanoa Hufanga, Elijah Mitchell, and Brock Purdy, all guys that were later round guys who have turned into very core pieces for that 49ers team.
And so let's talk about this. Let's get off of what Bedard said and talk more about the validity of this, because again, it's more than what Bedard has been talking about. We've heard from our buddy Braden Gall here at 440 and on a football show. Timmy Sama in the comments says that I love that he's spelling Buck B-U-C and not B-U-C-K. He's referencing Buck Rising, of course, our friend Buck. I like that we're spelling his name like it's short for Bucky's instead of Buck. So we're going to rock with that. But he says Buck has heard all of this. So is Buck lying? And Timmy also says that he believes there is some truth here, boys. So let's talk about this, because I want to be as crystal clear as possible. I am not saying that I know for a fact that Ran Carthon has been perfect here in Tennessee. There's a big difference between talking about his job performance in the past and talking about his job performance now. What Bedard did was question both, but specifically by name, he questions his job performance in his quote 49ers days. We have heard nothing but positive things from everybody with the 49ers organization, from the GM to the head coach to players. I mean, George Kittle, back when he was hired by the Titans, had a long talk about how he was always a big fan of Ran Carthon and was a great guy in the front office and is going to do great things. The GM also had a long statement on that. I mean, Ran Carthon notoriously was sent by the 49ers organization to Deebo Samuel's house when Deebo and AJ Brown and DK Metcalf, that offseason where all those guys were trying to get paid and Deebo was very disgruntled, he was sent, Ran Carthon was, to Deebo's house in order to smooth that over and get the deal done and get to marry the two sides once again and smooth things over. That's the kind of person that the 49ers saw Ran Carthon as, and clearly the Titans see that kind of thing in him because they hired him to be the GM of their franchise, not a job that you hire lightly, right? And so for Timmy to say, bringing up examples like Buck Rising, like Braden, I've heard from others who I'm not going to name, who said they've heard some things in and around the building. We've been talking about this in the show. I am not saying that I know that things are perfect and peachy and sunshine and rainbows and unicorns in the Titans front office, in the Titans building, between the front office and the coaching staff. I'm sure that there is some natural tension there, because guess what, guys? When your football team isn't good and you're losing football games, find me a team that has been on a long losing streak or is in they've really lacked talent and lacked success for a calendar year, which is where the Titans are at this point, that everything's hunky-dory and nobody's pointing fingers and nobody's a little bit tense. That's the nature of not succeeding in such a high-stakes business like the NFL. So I'm sure that there is some issue there, and maybe the relationship between Ran Carthon and Mike Vrabel that apparently may not exist very much. It wouldn't shock me at all if those two don't have a great relationship yet. I do believe that when he came in to the Titans, they didn't have a relationship beforehand, because both of them have said as much, that they kind of met on the job, which again is not necessarily a bad thing. Your relationship has to start somewhere. I do push back on this idea that, and maybe there's some truth to it. I know the NFL has started to dip their toe into this idea of pushing minority candidates, unfortunately, in my opinion, because of the color of their skin, as opposed to their qualifications. I totally understand that they're for a long time in the NFL was a lot of reason to believe it was kind of an old boys club and like guys not getting hired because of it's a double-sided issue here. I totally agree. It was bad in the past or now. If certain owners or teams weren't hiring folks because of the color of their skin, it is bad for the NFL, in my opinion, as well, to push guys because of the color of their skin and not their qualification. Now, if they're pushing guys that are minorities that are also qualified, then cool, awesome, great. Get the best guys in there, even better if there's better representation. And in my opinion, and from what I've heard on the whole of my evaluation of Ran Carthon and the job that he's done and the job that he was expected to do when he was hired, I believe that he is one of those guys that is a minority hire, which is a good thing for the diversification of the league. But he's also a guy that absolutely 100%, without a shadow of a doubt, was deserving of his job. He is not a guy that was hired to be a GM because he's sort of worked near the job. We think he can get away with it, and he's black. Like, that's crazy to me. That's crazy to think that. His track record absolutely precedes him. So this idea that he was a minority hire, he was an equity hire, it's crazy to me. Maybe there was some pushing from the NFL for the Titans, who in the distant past, the medium to distant past, have reportedly had some issues with this kind of thing. The league's kind of nudging the Titans like, hey, this would be a great guy to hire, and they vetted him. But I do not for a second believe that Amy Adams Strunk, who I think is a very competent, very talented owner, went and interviewed Ran Carthon and decided, you know what, we're going to, I'm talking to Mike Vrabel, and, we've decided we're going to hire this guy because we think that he's qualified enough and he's a minority, which is awesome. Like, no, they hired him because they thought he was the best guy for the job in a pool, I believe a final pool of 3 guys that included 2 white guys and Ran Carthon. Like, they didn't hire Ran Carthon because he was the odd man out. They hired him because they thought he was going to be the best man for the job. And for that reason, I think that the idea that he is a minority hire is ridiculous. I do not push back on this idea that there is potentially some turmoil in that building. JT, what have folks, before I continue, what have folks in the comments been saying about this idea? I want to spend most of today's show on this idea of Vrabel and Carthon and where the Titans are in the front office. But what have folks had to say about this? Yeah,
there's a couple here. First one from Green Thumb here saying Amy is not getting rid of Vrabel. This story is tiring, and I know the Pats reporters are bored because they
Green Thumb. I agree, it's tiring. Whether it's right or wrong, whether it's true or false, it is absolutely tiring. I hate talking about this kind of thing. We rarely go into this kind of specious speculation on the show, but I felt like today we kind of had to.
And then Daniel Fraser also says, which is an interesting point to what you said, it's possible he made it up, but just as likely that someone said all that to him, but without much context. Sure. So that's where maybe the story comes. And then Logan also coming in here and saying Vrabel isn't going to force his way out. I think Vrabel is pushing for more control over the roster versus 50-50 with Ran. Vrabel wanted his guy at GM so he could be the puppet master. Maybe a little far there.
So let's talk about that. Like, let's dive into that.
I was about to say, like, that also could be where the point of contention is. You have Vrabel, who is a guy who wants to have his guys, and you're bringing in a guy from a San Francisco kind of franchise who have been historically very, very good at finding good players. And I see where the two kind of sides could start to bash heads and realize that, and this is something we've talked about since Ran Carthon was hired, is that there might be a struggle for power, but ultimately how this will work is that they're going to struggle for power, but they all end up answering to Amy Adams Strunk in the end, and no one goes behind someone else because of that. That was kind of what was said at the beginning of his tenure. I still believe that. I think that is going to be what this relationship is built on, but you still are going to get bashing of heads and things like this from time to time, especially like you said, when your team is not doing good.
I agree. And we've talked about this in the show in terms of trying to parse out like who's actually in charge from a personnel standpoint, from a who plays standpoint. Is it Mike Vrabel's team and Ran Carthon still kind of like getting his feet wet? In my opinion, I believe on paper that it is what Amy Adams Strunk and Carthon and Vrabel all said back in the spring. It's a triangle, right? It is Ran Carthon and Mike Vrabel, and they are equals, and they answer to Amy Adams Strunk. I think that is on paper how things are. Now, would it shock me in the least to find out that in the building, in the actual art of war, when it comes to making a final decision or butting heads and somebody's opinion having to win out, Mike Vrabel has more sway, whether that's just in the relationship he has with Ran Carthon, and Carthon like bends the knee to him a little bit, or maybe it's that the folks that are, around, because it's not just Ran and Mike making these decisions. There's a whole support staff. Maybe the whole support staff goes with what Mike says a little bit more, than with Ran, because naturally Mike has built up a rapport with them, or maybe they fear Mike more than Ran, or whatever it may be. Like, that wouldn't shock me at all. But I think on paper, it is a 50-50 situation. And the whole thing is a mess from a narrative standpoint. I know a lot of folks are, again, calling this tiring and thinking it's a nothing burger. In general, there's a couple of things in life that I try to get back to basics on when I'm confused about something. And I was telling you about this like last night. One of the things I often try to resort to is when I'm trying to figure out why somebody did something or why something is the way that it is. I like to, and I'm sure I'm butchering the original quote, but like, I try not to attribute to malice what I can attribute to stupidity. Like, in general, I think that when somebody or something goes wrong, that it's usually because somebody was dumb and messed up and not because they were being malicious. That's one of the things that I try to live by. Another thing I try to live by is a saying that if you listen to any like medical dramas, I'm sure you've heard this before. Have you ever heard when you hear hoofbeats, think horses, not zebras? I love that phrase because it's basically just like, it's KISS. It's keep it simple, stupid. Like, in general, the simplest explanation is the true one, right? When you hear hoofbeats, think horses, not zebras. And when I hear the hoofbeats in this Titans organization of people are upset, there's a power struggle, Vrabel might want to get out, things aren't going well, they're not winning games, the team isn't talented, all these things, whose fault is it? Are people on the hot seat? All of this narrative mess. Which, again, I'm not going to sit here and lie and tell you I know the answer about how Amy Adams-Strunk feels about whose seat is hot and where this team is at. I'm not going to tell you about how any of these three people we're talking about feel, because I don't know. I'm not a mind reader. But I do believe that the easy explanation for why all of this is even a thing is that they're not winning ball games, is that this team isn't talented, and they're in choppy waters. Like, they're not in calm seas right now. They're not cruising. They're trying to batten down the hatches and just get through the night of the storm. Like, that's where they're at. And that's a natural part of team building cycle. It's a necessary evil. But I do think that another phrase that I'm probably going to butcher, big phrase guy today, winning fixes everything. And that's, I think, ultimately this team, I think Vrabel and Carthon are going to, I believe in general, the Diana Rossini report from The Athletic a couple of days ago about how, again, even though we know that Vrabel or somebody in Vrabel's inner circle is her source on pretty much everything Titans. And that's why she's often accurate, because often what Vrabel says is true to her. But like, I believe her report that in general, to generalize her report, Vrabel is expected, the Titans organization wants him to be their coach for the long term, and he plans on staying. She kind of doubled down on that report when Ohio State lost to Michigan this past weekend and said, sorry, Ohio State fans, Vrabel's not going anywhere. You can forget him as your next coach. Now, that's kind of interesting to me, not to get too squirrel sidetracked on this, but she, in the original report, was talking about how the Titans wanted Vrabel to be their guy for the long term. But then in that tweet, she kind of alluded to the idea that Vrabel isn't interested in going anywhere. And that's kind of an interesting thing. I don't think she'd say that without having some kind of a clue as to where his head is at. So I think that in general, it's the losing and it's the turmoil and it's the natural choppy seas of this team building cycle that is causing this. And I do believe that Ran Carthon and Mike Vrabel are going to be a partnership for at least the next, like, for the medium term future. I think that's where that's going to be for this team. I wouldn't be shocked at all if there's a little bit of a power play here from Mike Vrabel, where it's like, I'm not actually super interested in going to New England. I would like to stay here, but because they're interested and because we're in the team building situation that we're in, it can't hurt me to kind of wink and nod and blow kisses at the New England Patriots or any other team that is publicly interested in me, in order to, in the offseason, go to my ownership, go to my employers and say, hey, like, I'd like a little bit more power. Or I'd like a little bit more say in this, or I'd like a little bit more money. Like that wouldn't shock me at all. That's business, baby. That's how it works. JT, do you disagree with any of that? Do people in the comments disagree with any of that?
I personally don't disagree with that. I think I think that's very interesting situation right there now with Mike Vrabel and what he could do in the offseason. There's also a part to this where it is how much, like, what really changes for Mike Vrabel from going from a Titans team that has one of the highest like amount of cap next season and is probably going to have a pretty decent pick, to going to a Patriots team that, for better or for worse, is probably a lot more lost right now than this Titans team is. Like, what would you gain by doing that? It's hard for me to see him realistically wanting to do that, besides just kind of the pomp and circumstance of it all, him going back to his old team to coach that team that he won a Super Bowl as a player with. But just from looking at it on paper, this Titans team, even as much of a rough spot that they are in, it is better than the Patriots situation right now, and it will be better. It's better than the Patriots situation in 2024 and 2025 and beyond.
When again, and it's absolutely better if the Patriots were to try to trade for Mike Vrabel. They would be giving away the keys to their future in order to bring him in, right? Like, that those draft picks are what this New England Patriots team are going to really need in order to jumpstart this organization and be competitive anytime soon. So, any comments we need to address before we move on from this topic, because we do have some other things to talk about today.
Yeah, just to round this out, there's a couple here in which Zedine says can't speak to the hiring process, but everyone he has drafted is playing significant snaps this year, and we're going to get into that right after this, actually, on a couple of them, of two guys that he did. Tim Meadows also says in the case of maybe Ran Carthon wanting his own guy, historically new GMs hire their own coaching staff, and Vrabel wants to bring in his own guys, but how well has that worked so far? Might be time to bring in new coaches that would bring new life to this team and the players. All just interesting spots there.
I understand what you're saying there, Tim, about Vrabel wanting to bring his own players in. I mean, like, to play devil's advocate there, I am old enough to remember the 93 player season where the Titans were the number 1 seed, and Vrabel and John Robinson, you could argue whose guys were the ones that were brought in, but they had to bring in like 40 players that weren't on their roster on day 1 of the season in order to play very significant snaps that season. And you ask, like, how's that worked out so far? That year, they went through 93 guys and were the most injured team in the league by a country mile, and they were the 1 seed in the AFC. Like, that worked that time. Again, it's easy to forget that because the past calendar year or so, the last 17 games or so, it's not gone so well. And I am of the mind that I get where you're coming from there. I'm not to relitigate the past 17 episodes we've done on this show, but and sorry if I'm sniffly today. I've got a little bit of a sinus infection. I am of the mind that the personnel deficiencies on this team right now are much more a result of the job that John Robinson did than of Mike Vrabel bringing in his guys. I'm sure there have been some decisions that Mike Vrabel has made that have been wrong. Again, he is not faultless. He is not God. He's a man trying to coach a football team that I think on the whole, the whole record of his decisions have been very good. And he's made some bad ones recently, and that happens. And I'm willing to give him more time. And I think that he's willing to give this team some more time. So we can leave it at that. Okay, let's talk about what else we have to talk about on today's show. A couple more topics and then some news from producer JT before we get out of here on a Tuesday afternoon for the Wednesday show. Scrolling. I tell you what, on our rundown, it takes a while to get past that long quote from Greg Bedard. There's a lot of words there. A lot of words, not a lot of things to say, but a lot of words. Let's talk about Will Levis. Let's talk about the offensive line. Like you said, 2 players that Ran Carthon drafted this past season. Will Levis, the second round pick for the 33rd overall pick. And he also drafted Jaelyn Duncan out of Maryland. The Titans right now starting left tackle, got his first start at left tackle against the Panthers this past weekend. A lot of folks curious about the job that he did in that game. I got a chance this morning, finally, to go back, watch the all 22 of him and do my best to evaluate the job that he did and the situations that he was put in. And I have some thoughts on that. But let's start with Will Levis first. We've got a good friend here on the show, Sean McEvoy, professional quarterback coach, works with some of the biggest stars in the NFL and in college. I mean, personal quarterback coach to Malik Willis, and that's how we got involved with him. But he's been involved with guys that are starters around the league in the past, and he's going to be involved with many of the starters of the future that have come up through the high school and college ranks. So he is absolutely a source that we go to on a pretty regular basis. and he listens to the show. So Sean, if you're listening, we appreciate you, and we're going to have you back on the show once again at some point. We talked about this today when we were speaking with him. We're going to have him on the show at some point today to discuss Will Levis and what he's seen from him. But we had a little bit of a text conversation with him today. This was on the heels of him on his Twitter account talking about how he thinks that Bryce Young is in a pretty bad situation, but made it clear that he was not a Bryce Young like he is QB1. He was not a Bryce Young QB1 guy during the draft process. We had him on our show. He was gracious enough to give us some time on the quarterback episode pre-draft. We went through the top 10 quarterbacks in the draft. He gave us his top 10. He had Stroud and Richardson above Bryce Young, had Bryce Young as his QB3, I believe. He gave me some crap today on Twitter, by the way, for changing my opinion on Bryce Young. I said earlier, great sports talk, great sports analysis, great sports podcasting is about gloating when you're right, victory laps when you're right, and making fun of yourself when you're wrong. It's also about being willing to change your mind, in my opinion. The most annoying sports talk people are the people that double and triple and quadruple down on ideas when they're clearly wrong. And if you've listened to the show since April, you know that at some point in April, and he has given me a hard time for at the buzzer changing my opinion. Lay off me, Sean. Okay, all that matters is I came on the show and I did a mea culpa and said, for the past couple of months, I have had Bryce Young as my QB1. I don't believe that anymore. And for a couple of weeks now, I've not actually believed that. I'm bumping him down to 3. I just think that the physical deficiencies, limitations are going to be too much to overcome and too much to make him the QB1. I'm putting Richardson first and Stroud second, in kind of a second tier with Stroud and with Young. Now, you could argue, Easton, you're wrong about Stroud. Certainly seems like it so far. Certainly seems like he was QB1 with a bullet so far. It's very early, but he's been incredible. A lot of people were. But I've been gloating at points during this season about Anthony Richardson on the show, and he was giving me a hard time for that. So lay off, Sean. However, that's just, I had to put that out there. Let's talk about Will Levis, though. I did ask him during this conversation, hey, by the way, what are your thoughts on Will Levis? Like, what have you seen from him so far? And here's what he had to say about Will Levis in the 5 games he started for the Titans. He said, quote, I think he's been okay so far. Flashes for sure, has gotten away with a few bad throws and decisions. Obviously, really good versus Atlanta, which was huge. Earned him the grace to be more up and down since then. I thought he followed up with a strong first half versus Pittsburgh in a tough environment. Pretty average the last 3 weeks. I'd agree with everything he said so far. I agree with this next statement in particular. I'd like to see him use his legs a little bit more, maybe. A little over-reliance on scripted shot play calls and double moves, etc. But credit to him for hitting them when they've been open, which is something that Tannehill didn't really do at the beginning of the season. But he says, I agree with most who think it's a really tough evaluation with the offensive line situation, etc. He certainly hasn't been the problem or a reason that they've been losing games. He looks comfortable and confident. I think he's handling the situation really well and staying positive. But he did say, I'm a little bit surprised by some of the, quote, man, we definitely have our future at QB, end quote, statements that I've seen from some of the fan base. But I do like the optimism. So just wanted to share some thoughts from a pro's pro on quarterback evaluation. I agree with what he said. It sounds like we're on the same page. I totally agree that I want to see him use his legs a little bit more. I want to see him navigate the pocket more freely, like take off sometimes. You're a talented young player. Like I get it. You don't want to take hits or whatever, but with this offensive line situation in particular, and some of the days that this skill position group has, take off, man, go run. Like I've been watching the past couple of games, JT, and that's been a thing that he's done a couple of times where I'm like, go, just take off, Will. Have you felt that way when you've been watching him?
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like what I've said the last couple of weeks. It's whereas with between Will Levis and Malik Willis, it's been very opposite, night and day for me in my evaluation of the two, in which Malik Willis, he runs far too often finds ways to kind of get out of his reads and not let the play progress. And he instantly takes off or tucks the ball, and he's very prone to take sacks in his young career. Whereas I think Will Levis is the complete opposite. And I'm not saying one is better than the other, but Will Levis in his case stays in the pocket a little bit too long, waiting for plays to fully develop. And then when it's not there, still taking those sacks. I'd like to see him take off a little bit more, just as I would like to see Malik Willis stick it in the pocket a little bit more and let those plays develop. So like from two young guys like that, like I totally agree with him on his evaluation there of Will Levis. I'd like to see him extend some plays like we saw Bryce Young do against this Tennessee Titans defense, because like we saw the Carolina Panthers move the ball. When you get your quarterback out in space and able to extend those plays, good things can happen, and maybe a third down conversion rate like we saw against the Carolina Panthers wouldn't happen so often.
No, I totally agree. Let's talk about the other player that Ran drafted that I wanted to give some thoughts on very briefly. Jaelyn Duncan got his first start at left tackle, and like I said, I got some opportunity this morning to watch him. My general review on him, and again, I'm not gonna ever pretend to you guys that I am the master evaluator of any player on the field. Certainly not of linemen, right? Like I'm a not novice, but I am certainly not a master at evaluating linemen. A lot of my evaluation, to be totally honest with you, and I think that the best folks in this industry do this, I'm looking to people that I know are smarter than me on these topics and like double checking my work against theirs and getting my fundamental tenets of evaluation from them. And so my opinion, mixed with some opinions that I've seen from others that I trust, is that two things are true. On Sunday, he was the 5th out of 5 linemen out there for the Titans. So that starting rotation was the 5th best. And also, it was one of, if not the best performances at left tackle the Titans have had this season. Now, some things to parse that. They were playing a very, very bad Carolina team and a bad Carolina pass rush. So that helps. Very good. I mean, like, that's what you want, honestly, for a guy in his first start. A player that we talked about quite a bit during the pre-draft process, JT, before we knew he was ever going to be a Titan. I mean, I had a tweet on day 2, I think. I was saying he could be a late day 2 pick that would be a nice developmental tackle prospect or maybe a guard. He does have shorter arms, so like the length is a bit of an issue. And so some folks, like he got 33-inch arms. That's, I think, like 16th percentile for tackles. So it wouldn't shock me if long-term he's a guard in this league. But he played tackle for 3 or 4, maybe, I think maybe been 5-year senior in college at Maryland. And that's a position he was comfortable with. And they decided to play him at left tackle this past week. And he was fine. Again, it was better than some of the Dylan Radins performances, certainly better than some of the Dennis Daly. The Andre, at this point, they're synonymous in my mind. Truly, it's unfortunate, but they're the same person. Andre Dillard performances. And so that's good. Certainly some room to improve. His hand placement and technique, like the usage of his hands, up and down. The technique, you could tell he'd been working on some really nice polished technique on certain plays, and on others, he got beat. And part of that's because of the length, and part of that's because he's one of those guys, because of that shorter reach, he's going to have, like, his technique is technique's important in general, but his technique is so important because he's got to overcome that reach and that length deficiency. And there were some plays where he got in that way. I also took issue with his play strength on certain plays. There's that clip that went kind of viral during rookie training camp back in May of him going full panda Isaiah Wilson, where people made fun of him for in the bubble at practice one day getting absolutely bull rushed, I think by Peter Skoronski, and just put on his butt. And that was a meme then. And it was kind of funny watching. There were just a couple of plays in this Carolina game where he just got bull rushed out. I mean, just thrown out the gym, like just pushed back into the pocket, pushed back into Will Levis. His play strength was kind of an issue at times. And so that's one of my biggest gripes. But in general, one thing to be fair to him and a plus for him is they were giving him less help in this game, partially because against this Panthers team, they were finally playing an opponent bad enough where they were afforded the luxury of being able to not throw like 2 or 3 people to help chip on every single play for this wretched offensive line. But they weren't giving him as much help as some of the other left tackles have gotten in other games for this team. So it's not like he was kind of up and down and had a ton of help. He had some help, but it wasn't crazy. It wasn't like some of the games we've seen. And so the general opinion for me, the bottom line, now that I'm done rambling about all my thoughts on him, is this. He absolutely has a lot of room for improvement, and I do question whether or not he's going to be a tackle long-term in this league. I question whether or not he is a tackle solution for this team going forward as much as the team would like him to be, because that would certainly be nice. However, he definitely performed well enough in this one game against a bad team to warrant getting, I think, the rest of the season at left tackle or a tackle position to try out, to try to develop, to try to stack some games and show improvement. And the Titans, you could, especially considering their alternatives, like the other options, you throw Radins back over there. You throw, God forbid, you throw Andre Dillard back in there. They've already proven they're not going to bump Skoronski out. So there's that. I think that he's the guy you got to rock with going forward. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And like like Mike Vrabel said on Monday, and this is where I was able to agree with him. He said, yeah, he was okay. He had some good plays, but there are always things to improve. And I thought it was the exact same. I would put, yeah, he was okay. But for a 6th round pick in a 6th round rookie going into his first game against, like you said, a Carolina Panther team that ranks 28th in defense this season.
Not the worst.
It's not the worst, but it was a good start for him. I do think it's interesting that playing at left tackle, his run blocking ability improved greatly from his very limited play in the past 2 other games that he was in. I thought it was really helpful, especially on those 2 Derrick Henry runs. He was a big reason why Derrick Henry was able to get to the outside. And so he was doing a lot better in those games. And we have a couple of people here talking in the chat here. Tighten Up Tony says Duncan can be a starter. I don't know if he, like he's saying, I don't know if he is the starter, but I think he certainly can develop into a nice starter. Now, does he prove enough that upcoming in this next NFL draft, with just how much talent there is at the disposal of these teams to draft this year? Does that make you feel secure enough as you go into a different direction and not take one of these prime tackle guys? Yet to be seen, long shot in my opinion, but I do think that at worst he is a nice depth piece and can develop into someone that is useful for this Titans team.
Well, and here's the good news for Jaelyn Duncan along those lines. The Titans are a team that's in a situation where they need 2 tackles next year. Like, they need 2 new guys. And if he can prove that he's getting 2 quality tackles in an offseason, even when you have a higher draft pick and $100 million in cap space, very difficult. They're just not like, it's a supply and demand issue. And specifically a demand issue, or excuse me, a supply issue. There isn't any out there. Like, it's very, very difficult to find them. We ain't making them like we used to. And because of that, he could be in a situation where he's not your first choice if you could just like go full expansion team and like pick and choose your guys. But because it's so hard and there's so many, it's not just the offensive line for this team. Like, they've got gaping holes everywhere. He could be in a situation where maybe they draft a stud left tackle that's going to be their guy, and then he gets bumped over to right tackle, and it's like, we're gonna give you a long runway here out of necessity, Jaelyn. Like, you're going to get the last 7 games of the Titans 2023 season, and then the start of the 2024 season as the starter at a tackle position or somewhere on the offensive line, because we don't really have an alternative. I'm not saying that's going to be the case, but he's in a situation where it wouldn't shock me if that's what happens, right?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you.
All right, last topic today before we get to the news with producer JT. We're already an hour over. We spent a long time on that Vrabel discussion, but I think it was worth it. Let's talk about the playoffs. Playoffs? Talking about playoffs with the Titans? Yes, we are. It's an interesting one this year for the NFL and for the Titans. They're involved in this because they are one of the 20. What is this? 20. Is it 3 teams? Yeah, I think there's 29 teams in the league right now. Hang on, let me fact check myself.
That is correct.
Yeah, 29 teams in the league right now are within 2 games of a wild card playoff spot. There are only 3 teams in the league right now: the Patriots, the Panthers, and the
Arizona Cardinals.
The Arizona Cardinals. They all have less than 4 wins. They are the actual basement of the NFL. But every other team in the entire league has 4 or more wins, and every other team in the entire league is 2 wins away from a wild card spot. So get ready down the stretch here for, your intro or outro in or out of the commercial break, watching the broadcast of each and every game you watch. They throw up the AFC or the NFC or both playoff pictures, and then in the hunt. Get ready for an in the hunt section that, like, I don't know, maybe it's going to be like at the airport where you've got so many different departures that like it's a scrolling ticker. Maybe it's a scrolling ticker of teams because they can't fit them all in there. Maybe you're going to need to like get a really big flat screen in order for it to not to be pixelated so you can actually read the number of names. Like, it's the entire conference on both sides, but especially in the AFC, it's bonkers how many teams are in contention. Again, the Titans are at the bottom of the list of the teams that are in contention. It's them and the Chargers at 4 and 7. But they are right there with like the Raiders at 5 and 7, the Bengals at 5 and 6, the Bills at 6 and 6, the Broncos at 6 and 5, Texans at 6 and 5. Like, they're all right there. They've got 2 games left against the Texans. They've got a game left against the Colts, who are 6 and 5. They got a game left against the Jaguars, who are currently leading the division or at 8-3. They're one of the teams contending. I mean, the number 1 seed in the AFC is going to be a photo finish. It's going to be incredible. 4 teams from 4 different divisions, JT. The Ravens at 9-3, the Chiefs at 8-3, the Jaguars at 8-3, the Dolphins at 8-3. It's going to be a photo finish between those 4 teams for who gets that precious bye. That's not super common. Like, typically you have teams running away with it. Typically you have a pretty significant gap between the teams that are actually in the hunt and the teams that are kind of falling apart. So this is going to be a really, really exciting race down the finish here. I am not by any stretch of the imagination saying that I'm expecting the Titans to make a playoff push, but I am saying on paper, mathematically, they are absolutely still in the hunt. And if they win, I mean, if their home and away splits continue to prove true, it wouldn't shut, because the teams that are within one game of the teams that are within one game of 500 right now, the Colts, Texans, Broncos, Bills, Bengals, and then the Raiders, Chargers, Titans are all just over one more game away. That's 5 teams within 500 and 3 teams that are just shy of being within 500. That's 8 teams in total that are all, I think, going to, if things are like, maybe somebody starts to bottom out and just lose a ton of games. It wouldn't shock me if there's like 8 or 9 teams in the AFC this year that are all right there at like 10-7, 9-8, 8-9, 7-10, like all right there in that mix. And it's a lot of this guy gets this tiebreaker scenario, and they won the head to head, or they had the strength of schedule. That's where I see this finishing, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting. And as Kenneth says here, the immovable object versus the force. Now I'm messing up the phrases, but Titans home record versus Titans record against teams with a winning record. They're about to meet
that is an unstoppable force versus an immovable object.
It'll be interesting to see what happens this weekend and going forward, because the Titans will have a lot of games at Nissan Stadium. They will also have a lot of games against teams with winning records down the stretch here. So it will be very, very interesting.
Something has to fold. Something has to give, right? Like our buddy Mike Herndon tweeted out earlier this week that, he was like, do with this information what you will. The Titans are 0-5 against teams with a winning record this year, and they don't have a team left on their remaining schedule. The next, 6 games they have left? Yeah, 6 games that doesn't have, they have 6 teams in a row left that have a winning record. And they are currently 0-5 this year against teams with a winning record. The pushback on that, as Kenneth is referring to, is that all 5 of those losses came on the road, baby. They get 4 of their last 7, right? 4. No, 3 of their last 6. How many home games do they have left? 4, right? I think they have 4 of their last 6 games are at home. Yeah, yes. 4 of their last 6 games are at home.
You have the Colts, you have the Jaguars, you have the Houston, and you have Seattle.
Yeah, so 4 of their last 6 games, 3 of those being division games, are at home. So maybe the home magic runs out and they were just beating up on trash cans at home. Like, totally possible. They've beaten some really bad teams, and they've beaten some teams that aren't really bad. Like the Chargers aren't a really bad team. They're just a really middling team. The Bengals with Joe Burrow, he was hurt, but they beat some good teams right after the Titans trounced them. The Falcons are a very middling team. You could argue they're not a good team, but they lost very badly with the Titans. And then the Panthers, the definition of a bad team, the Titans made them look like a bad team. So maybe I don't know what, if gun to your head today, JT, I'm rambling so much on this. Gun to your head, which gives the home magic or the fact that their supply of bad teams to play at home has run out?
I think it's the home magic, man. I think
you think that gives?
I think it gives, man.
Okay, that is the sober, rational response.
But still, we could see this go all the way up into that Seattle game. Just think about it. There is a real possibility in which the Titans find a way to win against this injury and mistake prone Colts team this week, go on the road and get trounced by a Miami team, come back and get a get right.
Miami team, by the way, not to cut you off, but I'm not sure people need to be reminded of this. My buddy last night, our buddy Austin asked me, don't the Titans play the Dolphins this year? I go, oh, buddy, not only do they play the Dolphins still, but they play them on the road
on Monday night.
On Monday Night Football. Poor America being subjected to that. It's going to be a football game.
Yeah. But they could lose that game, somehow come back and upset CJ Stroud at home and then keep going.
Do you think the Texans get them twice? If you had to guess today, I feel like the Titans are going to find a way to win one of those 2 games.
And the first one will come. At home at Nissan, where they're once again wearing their throwback uniforms again. So that might
undefeated,
be
by the way,
yep.
Undefeated in the Oilers uniforms. I'll tell you this much: if that's 3 weeks from now, right? 3 weeks from now, I believe. I'll tell you, I right now I believe they're going to find a way to win one of those games against Houston. If they get beat handily at home against Houston, my tune's going to change so fast on that, man. Like I'm gonna be like, they're going to sweep them, they're going to murder them on the road in Texas. But knowing the Titans team, maybe it's the inverse because nothing makes sense. Z Dean says he's flying down to Miami for the Monday night game. He hopes it's at least a little close. My brother and dad were talking about this, and I was going to go with them just to cover the game on the road, which I do sometimes, but not all the time. And a couple weeks ago, we decided to just scrap that idea. It's like, maybe next year. So yeah, gun to your head, JT. One last gun. I'm putting so many guns to your head today. One last gun to your head. How many Titans have 4 home games left? How many of those do they win?
2.
I think it's 2. I think
I really think that Seattle game is a win.
Do they win? And then they lose out on the road. Is that what you think? They're going to win 2 more games the rest of the year?
Yeah, I think they win 2 games.
11.
Yeah, I mean, I think they have a good chance against that Seattle team, and then either the game at home against the Texans or this week against the Colts, I think, are their next best 2 chances to win, in my opinion.
I think you're right. But I also think, as I like to emphasize in this show all the time, that anything can happen. So a playoff picture that we're definitely going to keep an eye on. All right. Shout out to our wonderful and amazing sponsors, BoomBozz Craft Pizza and Taphouse. 3 locations in the Middle Tennessee area, in East Nashville, in Spring Hill, where we're at each and every Thursday night before Thursday Night Football doing the show. And then in Murfreesboro, wherever you are in the Middle Tennessee area, find the BoomBozz nearest you. Go check it out. You're going to love the food. I promise. Tell them that Easton and JT and the Hot Read podcast sent you. All right, JT, one last thing to get to today, and it is the news with producer JT. We got a lot to get to today. So JT, without further ado, what news do we have?
Yeah, let's start out with an AFC South roundup here and just talking about the best and worst NFL divisions based on their combined point differential this season. The AFC North, who have a lot of teams with winning records, 3 or 4 are in the playoff picture right now, have a
one of them's a fraud, but
combined point differential this season of 114 points plus 114. The next best division this year is the AFC South with a plus,
of course,
with a plus 18 point differential. So just goes to show you, first of all, that the AFC South is still finding ways to win games. But there's a huge disparity right now between the AFC North and the rest of the league.
It is. And there's also, I think you forgot to include it on the rundown here. There's a massive disparity between the rest of the league and the NFC South. I think their point differential is like minus 63 or something. So pretty much every division is right within 20 plus or minus of 0, except for the AFC North, which is way over, and the NFC South, which is way under. But yeah, of course, like as we all projected, the AFC South, the second best point differential team in the league, or the team division in the league. It's just a bunch of juggernauts down here.
Yeah, and one more thing on this, props to the AFC West, who have been able to somehow, despite a Miami thrashing of the Broncos 70-50, a minus 50 point swing in that differential, only -2 on the year. So congrats to the Broncos for bringing that back.
That is hilarious. That's a hilarious point, because if you take that one game out, they look so much better as a division.
They do.
I'm sure that they're kicking the Broncos for really. They're like the guy on the team project that didn't do squat, and you go up there to present, and the teacher's like, in order to give you all a grade, I need participation for everybody. And then that last guy is just like, I don't know. And he just reads the slide and doesn't get it right. Like that's the Broncos.
Yeah. And moving on now to a preview of this Titans and Colts game. Running back Jonathan Taylor will need to undergo thumb surgery, and the team is hopeful he can return in 2 to 3 weeks. Owner Jim Irsay said today. Of course, Zach Moss is there, and he was very impressive in the last time he played the Titans. But once again, the Titans will not have to face Jonathan Taylor, who has looked really good the past couple weeks since coming back from his contract dispute.
Yeah, I was going to say, the good news is that they don't have to see Taylor, who has looked better and better and more dominant the past couple of weeks. That's good news. Bad news is they're going to have to face Zach Moss again, who, again, I think he had 165 yards for 2 tuds when they played in Indianapolis in week 4 or week 5 this year. So Zach Moss, it's the revenge game against Zach Moss for this Titans defense. They'll have Teair Tart back, I'm assuming. So perhaps this is a get right spot for them against the fighting Zach Mosses.
Moving on here for the Texans, a source reported today that the Eagles' edge, Derek Barnett, was claimed by the Houston Texans. So another pretty solid piece for that Houston Texans team who, despite losing to the Jacksonville Jaguars this past week, still do have a very real shot at the division and are looking to make a playoff push.
That D'Amico D just getting better and better. And I think they got a little bit better by adding Barnett, former volunteer of VFL. Tennessee Titans clearly weren't interested in pandering to the Volunteers by entertaining him, and the Texans get him off the waivers. I think that he's probably going to be a plug-and-play guy down there.
Another guy that many Titans fans wanted the Titans to be interested in, but it doesn't look like it'll happen. Free agent linebacker Shaquille Leonard, who was cut by the Colts a week and a half ago, visited with the Cowboys today, and it concluded without a contract. A familiar source with the situation said, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he won't sign with them, but now he moves and goes to Philadelphia to meet with them, and we'll decide after that. So one of those NFC East teams that are looking to make a push.
He feels like a retread old linebacker, like we'll just patch our whole linebacker with this guy. Move for the Eagles. I kind of feel
that's what I agree. Yeah,
this is going to be an Eagle play.
Yeah, I think so as well. And then finally, Eddie George is one of the 25 semifinalists for the Pro Football Hall of Fame induction for next year. He's one of those semifinalists. It's his second time, and the list will be trimmed to 15 with up to 5 making it. So he is once again in the hunt this year.
Yeah, very cool recognition for him. He's not going to get in. I don't think he's ever going to get in. He's one of those guys that's in that very, very good and close, but not quite tier. And it's cool that he's getting recognition as being a close, but not quite guy. So maybe he'll get lucky, and the people in charge of voting, Paul Kaharski and the gang, decide that he deserves to be in. But I wouldn't hold your breath on that. All right. That is producer JT with the news. And that is our show today. Appreciate everybody with a little bit of a longer show. Last time we went an hour 15. It's been a long time, JT. It was a good one today. Appreciate everybody tuning in with us live. If you listen to us in post, appreciate you listening to the podcast or the YouTube video version of the show. Come hang out with us live next time. It's a great time, and we'd love to have you in the comments like so many of you were with us today. Make sure to tune back in Thursday. Super easy, 5:30 each and every Thursday. 5:30 Eastern. Why do I keep saying Eastern? I live in Central Standard Time. What's wrong with me? 5:30 Central Standard Time on Thursday before Thursday Night Football. Who's playing this week? I've forgotten. JT,
it's the Cowboys and Seahawks.
Cowboys, should be a good matchup. I like that. I like Cowboys Seahawks. So we'll be talking Best Bet Gauntlet at the end of the show, which is my favorite segment all week long. But to start the show, most of the show, we're talking about the Titans and the Colts. Big rematch for the Titans at home this time in Nissan Stadium at noon on Sunday. We'll be talking all about that matchup and what the Titans need to do differently this time to change the outcome of this one. Until then, for producer JT, I'm your host, Easton Freeze. Subscribe on YouTube at Broadway Sports Media's YouTube page. It's free. It's very helpful to us. And please follow us on social media at Hot Read Pod on TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram. Until Thursday, this has been the Hot Read Podcast, and we'll talk to you then.